Today on the Changeville podcast, we're talking to James from Moon Hooch. Moon Hooch is by far one of the most unique artists to break out in the past decade. From busking in New York in 2010 to their fourth studio release in December of last year, Moon Hooch has taken dance music by storm, bending its definition along the way. As a self-identified cave music band, Moon Hooch creates sounds which are traditionally made with computers and synthesizers using only 2 saxophones and a drum kit. They differentiate themselves further with their cooking guide and web series, Cooking in the Cave, which explores the ability to eat healthy with incredibly minimal resources. Additionally, the band goes to great lengths to use locally grown ingredients to support local businesses and promote the use of organic produce. They are currently promoting their most recent release, the Joshua Tree EP. We're honored to have James from Moon Hooch on the show today. So how are things shaping up for Moon Hooch in 2017, James?
Things are good. We have been in the studio a lot, working on a lot of new music, working on improvising a lot. We just got a new synthesizer that we've been playing around with and trying to get some nice sounds out of. And past few days, we've been trying to use those sounds contextually within the group in an improvisatory way. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So you're kind of working that into some of the older material as well, and kind of just seeing how the jams come out like that?
Not really. The older material is kind of set in stone in a way. I mean, I don't want to say that because every time we play the old material, there's ideally there's a fresh energy. But I guess what I mean by that is that the instrumentation remains the same, all the older material. But the synth we've kind of been using in a more fresh way.
Right, and, sort of changing things up.
Creating music that way. Yeah, changing things up. Just trying to explore new sounds.
Because you guys sort of, like you said, you have your hits, but they're not necessarily set in stone. But like the hits are the hits. But when you jam live, do some of your own original songs kind of take on different forms and kind of implementing the synthesizer as another way to keep it fresh for yourselves?
Yeah, I mean. The melodies remain consistent, and the drum groove is pretty much consistent. The ornamentation might be a little bit different in terms of the drums, but the melodies are consistent. And obviously, if the song has a solo section, the solos are always a little bit different.
Well, let's jump into some social change questions here, some Changeville-related things. So Changeville is all about starting conversations about current issues and kind of evoking social change through art. So what do you feel is the musician's role in the conversation about social change today, and how does that kind of apply to you guys?
Well, I think musicians are in a unique position because, musicians are conveying, ideally the music of the time, which is reflective of the things that are going on in the world, in a pretty big way, especially with his vocals, which is something that Mike of Moon Hooch has been exploring a lot.
Right.
But there's also the energy of music itself, which conveys, in terms of the band Moon Hooch, and, we have a lot of opposition to what's going on currently, especially with the recent election.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a lot of aggression, obviously, and our listeners can expect some more of that.
Yeah.
Musicians' role is to play music that reflects the time that we live in. We're in a unique position because a lot of people listen to first of all, listen to our music, and then second of all, listen to what we have to say. We're kind of like a social platform. So it puts us in a position to talk about and express what's relevant and what's important, for humanity and for the now.
Right, and it's interesting that you mentioned sort of doing that with and without lyrics, because you guys have done that. I mean, with Monsanto, you've implemented lyrics, and you said Mike was sort of the one heading that up, but you also kind of do it in energy with your instrumental stuff, correct? Like just kind of the way you guys present yourselves live?
Absolutely.
Well, one thing that we took a particular interest in at Changeville is your Cooking in the Cave series, where you give easy examples of sustainable and healthy meals, and yeah, your advocacy for local farms can also be heard clearly in Monsanto. What can you tell us about your motivations for cooking in the cave?
Well, I'm really passionate about food, first of all. So I love to cook. That's like a passion of mine, aside from music. And I also love cooking for the guys on the road. And the inspiration to make Cooking in the Cave, which is essentially just documenting what we're doing backstage in the kitchen, the traveling kitchen.
Yeah, I just the episode where you're making a curry backstage and just on a hot plate backstage, and I think you actually leave for a minute to go like check the kit and come back in. Like the
Absolutely.
idea of it is nuts. Like I don't know, is that just something that you always did, like kind of cooking bare bones, or is that something that was like a skill learned by touring?
It's something I've been doing for the past 4 years, and yeah, I mean it gets crazy because we often arrive like right on time or just slightly late for sound check. So if we're gonna cook a meal and set up the kitchen and do sound check, it's suppose as long as nothing gets burned, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah, being on tour would certainly put you on a time crunch for things like that. I mean, I guess the guys are lucky to have someone who is so passionate about cooking that he'll cook in the green room.
Yeah, what's been the savior is the toaster oven, because we travel with this little toaster oven, and you can fit a whole meal in there. I mean, especially during the fall is the best because we make roast vegetables, and the possibilities of burning things on the skillet are way higher than they are if you just, set the oven for, roasting temperature and then put whatever in the oven, and then it's ready to go after sound check, and you don't have to worry about it. So that's been kind of the saving grace. Before the toaster oven, there were definitely times where it was like, shit, I'm making these beans or whatever on the skillet, and we have to do sound check, and I'll just turn the skillet off. I've learned to do that.
Before the toaster oven, it sounds like a very, very dark getting by the by the hair of your chin time. Are there going to be any new additions to the series in the future?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the videos?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do more of those. I mean, I've been posting recipes, just like the recipes that I think are the most exciting. I've been just writing about them and taking pictures and posting them on the website. The videos, we haven't really done that in like over a year, I think. But there's no reason other than the fact that we're every time we show up at a venue, it's like go, and there's rarely time to stop and film. But maybe that's a mentality thing. We could probably set up a camera and do some more. And fun.
Now, is that kind of like a hectic environment to sort of be in when you're on tour, or is it more just everything's fast paced, but you're so used to it that you still kind of find time to breathe?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a nutshell, the answer is yeah, it is kind of hectic, but I think it's a matter of mentality. If you just kind of embrace the chaos, it becomes a lot easier. Also, if you show up early for sound check, obviously that's a lot easier, and there's no chaos. Yeah. Which is easier said than done.
Now, I saw in your in the Between the Notes series that Wenzel meditates and I know he kind of talked about sort of perceiving the band as a sort of single entity that creates music rather than the three of you jamming in separate musicians. Now, this might have been from a while ago, but is this something that you all take part in, and how does that kind of affect your energy on stage?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, we're different bodies, obviously. There's Mike, Wenzel, and James, and we're all, we have our backgrounds before we met. But the energy that we do create on stage is a manifestation of our interconnectedness in a big way. And when we play music together, there's, oftentimes we'll be playing music for a while, and then something will just kind of click. Where we're kind of like all on the same page in intense focus with each other and the environment, and maybe the audience too, maybe not. Sometimes we kind of like it feels very much like the energy is like the three of us, and then there's depending on the crowd, and the audience is also with it. It's kind of an abstract thing to talk about, but yeah, I definitely feel the same way.
So with jamming and with kind of like you said, reaching those moments where it kind of feels, united in that sound, and you know that you're in the groove. Like, you're in the pocket, and everything you're doing just, there's no mistakes going on, because it's just, it's perfect. It's the three of you jamming.
Yeah,
is
you just
is
reach
that
that
like
realm where there are no mistakes.
yeah?
You're just like in the flow or whatever. Yeah.
Is that how some of your guys' songs come about, or is it that more like someone brings like a lick to the table and then you kind of, structure something around it?
I would say definitely. I mean, the compositional process happens in any number of ways, but actually more and more often these days we're in an improvised setting, and then something will happen, and then that'll kind of be the seed for a new composition.
Right.
We also write compositions in a way where we're by ourselves, and we to the rehearsal that we then expand upon. But often, yeah, definitely we'll be jamming, for lack of a better word, and something will happen and inspire all three of us to sort of examine it more and go deeper into whatever that thing is and expand upon it and make something more concrete.
And that's interesting, because you guys are all very like musically literate people. I mean, like you completely understand theory, because you guys met in school, right?
Yeah, we all met at this place called the New School in New York City, which is music conservatory.
And so, you still sort of, even with all that knowledge, it's sort of, you still go back to the feel of it when you're writing. It was learning the theory sort of something that helps that come more naturally when you're jamming, and those moments can happen more often because of the knowledge that the three of you have?
I would say, yeah. I mean, there's musicians out there that create amazing music with having no knowledge of theory whatsoever, and there's spontaneous things that happen that are really deep and just, kind of inexplainable in a way. But I definitely do think that knowledge of music theory allows a musician to, dive deeper into what moves them about music, if that musician is harmonically inspired and melodically inspired in a more intellectual way, which all three of us are, definitely.
So when and why did you start playing music and writing songs?
I started on piano when I was really young. I was just taking piano lessons. My older sister was taking piano lessons, and so was I, kind of as a result. And my mom was an artist, and she always put on either Cuban music or classical music or like 80s music when she was illustrating or doing whatever with her art. So I was exposed to music at a young age, and then it wasn't until I was 12 that I got really into the drums. For whatever reason, I just was really into that and started taking lessons on the drums. I guess that's kind of how it started in a nutshell. And then, in high school I had a band. We played ska and punk music, and that got me really into writing music, and got me into playing the drums in a more serious way. And then through ska music, I was exposed to jazz music, which I had kind of got obsessed with at the end of high school, and then through college, obviously, because I went to a jazz conservatory.
Yeah.
And got really into practicing and learning, and that hasn't really stopped. I'm still as inspired to learn more as I was like 10 years ago, when I first started, I guess you could say, taking music seriously, although it sounds weird to say.
Well, I guess part of taking it seriously, continuing into your career is saying that you're just as much of a student as you are a performer or like a creator of it, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes it feels like the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know about music. Yeah,
because you sort of, as you go, you sort of come up with more and more questions. Every time you learn something or learn why something is.
Absolutely.
So what were those first? What were those first jam sessions like with Moon Hooch, or before you guys even had the name? Because I know you were playing in a couple different bands at that time.
Well, Wenzel and I were playing on the street just to kind of pay rent. I played with Wenzel before. We had gone to Switzerland together, played at a jazz festival. I've been in a few groups with him, and so we were playing jazz music. And I was also playing with Mike, too, the year after I met Wenzel in an ensemble, and we had jammed together a few times. And then Wenzel quit school and went to work on a cruise ship playing clarinet, flute, and saxophone. And then when he came back, he had all this newfound knowledge about electronic dance music, and he got really into producing music on Ableton. And that, he basically influenced me and taught me how to play an elemental house groove. He kind of exposed me to improvising in like a house music, a dance music setup. And we did that on the street in New York and in the subways. So initially it was just me and Wenzel, and then one day Mike was also doing the same thing with another drummer, a friend of ours, and something clicked. You know, Wenzel provided the harmony because he's a really lyrical player, and then Mike has this kind of like really aggressive way of playing the saxophone that works well for the bass. And you know, they trade off too. Wenzel plays bass, and Mike plays the harmony, and they trade off. But having that bass and harmony combo along with the rhythm of the drum set kind of created a sonic spectrum that is easier to dance to, easier to listen to.
Yeah, there's something special about having an ear for harmonies, you know, like someone who can just, you know, sing them on the dot. It's incredible. And it's just, you know, you never really know that that's missing until you have like the other wind player come in, and, you know, so they're not just, you know, not just soloing, you know, over a rhythm. It becomes more of a song, I guess. And if you guys are talking house music or what eventually became cave music, you know, having that counter melody, I guess, is certainly would be part of it.
Absolutely.
Is it true that
deep about the number 3 too? You know, because it takes 3 dots to create a shape.
Yeah.
You know, that it creates this whole new layer of communication. You know, if you have 2 people, it's very much a one-way thing. But if you have 3 people, it becomes this very dynamic way of communicating.
Right, then there's more to think about, I suppose. But the fact that you guys are all well-versed musicians and friends, it sort of makes the improvisation very easy, because you're not like taking turns to speak. You're like it's like having a natural conversation almost.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, ideally, yeah, for sure.
So something I read about you guys and about playing in the subways those nights playing out there, is it true that an impromptu rave broke out one time when you were playing in a New York subway?
That actually happened a lot. Basically, every rush hour that we played, raves would break out, which is crazy because that's like late afternoon and everyone's sober. And then, I mean, the real raves would break out when we played down there on the weekends at night.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are going out to bars and they've already pre-gamed a bit and they're like, you know, ready to dance. And then, you know, if we stay down there long enough until like 2 or 3 a.m., people coming back from the bars, coming back from partying, would, you know, start insane raves. And most of the people down there are really uninhibited and just like going crazy. But yeah, that happened at least 100 times when we were playing down there.
Jeez. So, I mean, did you have like regulars? And I mean, I'm assuming the tip money was fantastic, right? You were doing this to pay rent?
We did this to pay rent, yeah, and it worked out really well, for sure. There were definitely regulars, one of which was a man by the name of Antenna Man, who was also a saxophone player. And I haven't seen him in a long time. I hope he's doing well. He's like this old-timer from New York City, saxophone player that played with Sun Ra, I guess, for a bit, and he's just an insane guy, musically and otherwise. And he would show up with his saxophone and play with us.
That's awesome. Did you say Antenna Man?
Antenna Man, yeah.
So shout out to Antenna Man.
Absolutely.
What are the laws like for busking in New York subways? Because I know back home where I'm from, they recently passed a law banning all kind of busking or even street art at all. And I had some friends from high school that we used to go out there every weekend, and, you know, families would picnic, and it was so much fun. But then, you know, it seems to be a thing that more and more cities are not keen to. Do you know what it's like there in New York now?
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to bust without getting kicked out. I mean, we got kicked out pretty much once every 5 to 10 times that we played down there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's illegal if you don't have a permit, and we never had a permit. So, and especially when there's a huge crowd of people and the police deemed an unsafe performance or whatever, they would, you know, make an attempt to kick us out. But, you know, like 10 cops show up at once and try to kick us out.
Must be a hard
which
thing to
obviously,
stop a rave in a New York subway.
yeah, I mean, when there's a lot of people like booing them, it definitely discourages them from, making a scene.
Right.
And actually, the crowd helped us out a lot in that way. But oftentimes we would just be down there during rush hour, and they kick us out, and there's no crowd. They just, that's a different story. But yeah, it's hard to play down there, playing music as loud as we did, without getting kicked out. And there's a lot of buskers now that have permits that they can play on the mezzanine, but they're not allowed to play on the platform, which is where we were playing, on the platform, where people were actually waiting for the trains.
Another thing that I was curious about, cave music. So for anybody who's not really familiar, can you describe kind of what you guys say is the cave music sound and kind of how that got coined?
It was actually coined not by us, but by our friend Matt Hughes. He actually left me a voicemail one day shortly after the band formed, and the voicemail went exactly like this. He said, "Hey James, I just thought of a new style of music. It's called cave music. It's like house, but more jagged, wild, free, and more natural to live in."
That's awesome.
And the idea is that we live in houses now, playing house music, and we used to live in caves, so it's kind of like a more primal way to play acoustic, you could say natural music.
Yeah. Was there like a conscious decision to go into it, like emulating like electronic dance and funk, or was cave music just kind of the way the three of you guys sounded when you would play?
Well, the initial concept was playing electronic music with acoustic instruments. That was the original concept.
So I guess for new listeners, what would you like them to know about the Joshua Tree EP?
We're really happy about it. We think it's our best representation of our live energy yet. I feel like the compositions are as interesting as they are energetic, which is cool because I feel like in the past our compositions, at least the way they sound on recording, is like either they're energetic or they're really compositionally refined and don't have really a lot of energy. And that's kind of the way I feel about our second album, whereas the first album has a lot of energy and it's kind of reflective of like the super party mode that we were in when we were playing down the subways. So Joshua Tree, I feel like, is a good balance of both of those things.
Is that kind of something that comes with maturing as a musician and maturing with a group of musicians, where you sort of, when you start off gigging together, you kind of have the choice between super energetic and simple, or, like you said, kind of refined and really detailed and really thinking about playing something that's intricate, and then, and then now you can do both. You can have super energetic, wild, but the arrangement is actually something that you find you can challenge yourself with as a musician.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the whole spectrum. I don't think it's one way or the other. That's just how I would talk about ways of comparing the albums that we put out so far. But everyone's approach to music is different. But I definitely think with the second album we are kind of going for something that we didn't really quite know how to do yet, in terms of the way we were sort of. I don't want to say too much about that. Honestly, I don't really like our second album. I don't want to talk about it. But I do think the Joshua Tree is definitely the best one yet.
Okay, and that's only going upwards. So that's good
for sure.
Can you tell us anything about what you guys are currently working on in the studio?
A lot of improvising. Last year we went to Berlin and checked out the music that's happening there in the electronic scene, and we're trying to find a way of improvising in that style with Berlin techno, which has been really fun and really engaging for the body and for all of our minds. It's a cool way of improvising. It's basically like a really assertive way of improvising, where if you make a decision, you just kind of have to stick with it.
Yeah.
And it's very loop-based, and the changes that happen are subtle, but when they do happen, they're really exciting.
And that's kind of part of house music, is sort of, people who aren't, super into house music might just say, well, it's repetitive, or, everything's in 4. But, I guess listening to like a 9-minute jam is kind of noticing the subtlety of the differences and sort of the wall that's built by the end of the song. And is that kind of part of Berlin techno and what you guys have been listening to?
I would definitely say that, for sure.
So what are some of your influences, whether it's new, including that, or whether they're, some older jazz musicians that you listen to? Who inspires you?
I would say that John Coltrane is first and foremost in terms of, like, how much he's made me cry.
I understand that on a personal level.
Yeah, for sure. John Coltrane, for sure, number one. And then Indian classical music in a big way for the last few years. The repertoire of the tabla. In terms of jazz music, I would say, John Coltrane and, all the great bebop musicians, all the great post-bop musicians, literally all of them. I mean, that's just a really cool era of music. I think it's really cool. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of drum and bass music and Aphex Twin and Square Pusher, which I think is really cool. And my friend just exposed me to this producer, AK 1200, which is like really sick drum and bass that, I've been listening to a lot lately. Indian musicians that I really like are Ustad Ali Akbar Khan and Pandit Nikhil Banerjee. And tabla players that I really like are Zakir Hussain, of course, because he's like the best tabla player alive. And my teacher, Samir Chatterjee. In terms of drummers, I would say Taishan Sori, who's as good of a drummer as he is a composer, and also Dan Weiss, who's also an amazing composer and drummer, and who I studied with while I was in school. Actually, I studied with Dan Weiss. But I would say that's kind of the bulk of it. I really like classical music. I really like Chopin and Bach. And I really like contemporary classical music like Karlheinz Stockhausen, Morton Feldman, John Cage. I really like Brahms.
So a huge variety of things, which comes along with being a student of music. And I guess that's something that now is that kind of, because this is a huge spectrum of music, from a lot of different nationalities, which is interesting and I think important, when you're really going to be learning. Is that something that came about when you went to school for music and sort of encountered, whether it was different teachers or different students from different countries?
Well, in terms of Indian music, I guess the first time I was exposed to that was through my teacher, who, the new school has this thing where you can kind of study with whoever you want to, living in the city, of course, living in New York City. And I saw Dan Weiss play one night, and he was playing things that were totally over my head, but inspired me and really just kind of like hit me in the head, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I started studying with him, and after the first few lessons, I realized what was resonating with me the most with his playing were things that he had learned through studying tabla and through learning Indian music. So that's what got me into studying tabla. And then tabla brought me into the world of Indian music, which I drew inspiration from. Then I started studying tabla with his teacher, who is Samir Chatterjee.
And that makes sense because, like you said, like when you first heard him, it was stuff that was absolutely blowing you away or sort of passing over your head, and you had to know why that was, and you like wanted to be able to do it. And I guess, as a musician, I've been told time and time again, like the way to improve is to play with people who are better than you. Seek out people who are better than you, whether it's they're going to teach you or you're just going to try to jam with them. Because, like, it keeps you on your toes, I guess. So, being exposed to a foreign genre or foreign rhythms must have certainly served as a tool for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it affected my body as much as it affected my mind. It was really emotionally just, like, overwhelming. Aside from the fact that there seemed to be some kind of symmetry and mathematics behind it, which was really intellectual. It had a deeper meaning for me, especially when I first heard it, because I had never heard it before, so it was it was like I said, like hit me in the head.
Well, I have a few more questions for you before we wrap things up. So this one's usually pretty difficult for our artists. What one song do you think everyone needs to hear and why? And this can be one of yours or you know, something you've heard recently or...
I would say Georgi Ligeti's Lux Aorta. Oh, I'm sorry, Lux Eterna.
Lux Eterna.
It's this amazing. If you've seen 2001: Space Odyssey, this piece is in it. It's a piece for 8 male vocals and 8 female vocals. So 16 vocalists in total, and the piece it's amazing. Every time I hear it, it gives me chills. And if aliens were to come down today and I were to give them one piece of music to listen to that humans have created, I would probably, say that. So I love Ligeti.
That's probably a better way for me to phrase this question in the future. If aliens were to come down today, what one song would represent humanity? That's much more demanding. Do you have any last thoughts for our listeners?
Not really, no.
Great. I mean, we covered a lot of ground. I have to say, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm a huge fan. I got to geek out for at least a second here. This is really cool.
Oh man, it's been great talking with you.
I really look forward to seeing you guys at Changeville in March.
Hell yeah, me too, man.
All right, I'll see you soon.
See you soon, bro. Take care.
Thank you so much to our guest James from Moon Hooch. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of the Changeville podcast. Until then, check out our website or Facebook page. Our lineup is out now and includes Talib Kweli performing with a full band, Amy Ray of the Indigo Girls, Moon Hooch, David Bazan, Big Sam's Funky Nation, and Big Frida. Tickets are going fast, so get yours now. Until next time, this is Matt, signing out.